There was a Elvis album, came out a long time ago that shows him in a gold lame suit on the front, and the title of it is 50 million Elvis fans can't be wrong. Well, 50 million Jim Haley fans can't be wrong either. Maybe he just is that good of a guy. I'm Mark Rowe, and I am a deputy prosecuting attorney, which I've been on the criminal side for about 20 years now. I have to deal with any of the emergent deadline type issues for cases that are just coming up, and half the time I'll find out that something big has happened because Jim will call me asking me about it. Nothing happens in this county that Jim doesn't know about. I dealt with Jim with Victor David. I dealt with Jim with Richard Clark. I dealt with Jim with Paul Gore, a serial rapist. I dealt with Jim with Steve Cady, another murderer. I dealt with Jim with, you name it, he's been there. Or I'll tell people, victims, that the media would like to talk to you about this. I know that Jim Haley of the Herald would like to talk with you. He is someone you can trust. Reasonable minds don't differ about Jim. Everybody trusts the guy. Everybody likes the guy. Everybody, I think, sees him the same way, as somebody who's genuine and intelligent and funny and cares and has honor.
I first saw Jim Haley in probably 1983 or 84. There was a flood. The Pilchuck River had come up out of its banks, and it was an odd flood because it doesn't do that very often, but it flooded a neighborhood. And out in the water in front of a house was this interesting-looking fellow in waders with a notepad held up above the water interviewing this family that was trapped in their house by flood. And I just thought, oh, that's cool, and I took the picture. I brought it back because I thought it was the best photo I'd got that day, and I showed it proudly to everybody, and they said, oh, that's just Jim Haley. I'm Scott North, and I am an assistant city editor here at the Herald, and I have worked with Jim Haley since 1987. I think that anybody that's worked in this part of the country that's covered significant stories involving the Navy, involving crime and punishment in Snohomish County, involving Congress, they know Jim. They know him by reputation, or they know him because he's beaten them on a story. Jim's a marathoner in the sense of a journalist. He stays at it. He doesn't go away. He is patient and persistent, and he's broken major stories during the course of his career. I think Jim really helped set, the ethic of how we cover crime. There was a man released from prison, work release, into the community. He had gone to prison for raping a woman. He came back to that woman's house, killed her, killed that woman's little girl, and killed the neighbor who had come over to the house to check on that family. That guy's name was Charles Rodman Campbell. He was tried, convicted, sentenced to die. Jim covered that story from the night that the murders were discovered until Campbell's execution, which happened in '94. A really significant part of the Charles Campbell story that had ramifications outside of just this community, it really affected the entire state, was Jim discovering that Campbell had been allowed into work release even though he had violated most of the rules in the prison, shouldn't have been considered a candidate for that. That led to changes in the way the state, basically brought an end for decades the parole system. It led to, mandatory sentences. One of his real strengths is that he has written every story in the newsroom that you can cover in this community probably 2 or 3 times. And so he has always been a go-to guy for editors, and he also just never backs away from work. I don't think anybody works as hard as Jim Haley. And that, there's a lot of hard workers, but Jim sets a standard that's pretty hard for people to match.
My name is Jenny Whelan Ward, and I'm the Executive Director of Families and Friends of Violent Crime Victims. I am proud to say that I have known Jim for over 12 years in his role as reporting on crime here in Snohomish County. Not only has he written stories about what's happened in court, but also the story of a journey from being a victim to survivor. I know that when Jim has written about the sentencing of these perpetrators. He has written with feeling and depth, trying to portray to the community the pain that these families are in. Again, I just want to say how much we appreciate Jim's compassion and empathy towards crime victims.
Well, I'm Jerry Knight. I'm a Superior Court judge. Have been since 1982. Jim knows. He knows what's going on in the courthouse complex more than I do. He's everything I think a good journalist should be. He's there on a pinnacle, by himself. He doesn't have an equal. We're all going to miss him. Yeah, I'll miss the old man with the cane and his good sense of humor.